Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being there. We'll try to make this quite quickly so that we still have time for the presentation, etc. So last time we have just dived into the introduction to forecasting, and we have focused on point forecasting. And today the focus will be on probabilistic forecasting. But it is only an introduction, of course. I will not give you everything about this topic, and you don't need to know everything about this topic. I think for you, a short introduction will be fine for your life as engineer or future decision maker, as minister, I hope. Because I count on you. Huh? You already know that. As for the previous lecture, there are some resources here that you can, where you can find more information. So the lecture of Pierre Pinson, which is really the best guide of this kind of topic in the world of fantasy. And they are free and online, open access. You don't have to pay anything for that. And they are composed of short video, like 10 or 15 minutes. So if you want just to see a small topic, it's quite nice. There is also the summer school at the DTU, which is the same. And here it's a book, but it's only if you want to do PhD thesis. Don't worry. And here, this is my PhD thesis. It's the same. It's the same. It's only if you want to do a master thesis about that topic. Otherwise, this one is quite fine. Okay, so this lecture will introduce you probabilistic forecast and, of course, how to assess if they are good or not. Because it's great if you can produce forecasts, but if you don't know if they are good or bad, it's not really worth it. And as the decision maker, when we provide them information, they want to know, but is it reliable or not? Because you are telling me that, but if it's not reliable, maybe I will take a decision a little bit different than if you tell me that it's a really strong and reliable information. So first, a little reminder, and you should know how to answer that now. So why we do forecasting impact? Do you have any idea about that? You can tell me I don't care about forecasting and the last lecture was crap. So that's why I do not answer. But if you're interested in, why do you think we do forecast? To make decisions, of course. So you are interested in one in 20, not bad. Now, but really forecast, and we use all of us forecast every day is just to make decisions in everyday life. So weather forecast, the first one, and then we have other type of forecast that we use every day. So this is to make a decision. And in microgrid and energy system or in general, we perform forecasts for the renewable generation, so PV, wind power, hydraulic power, and so on, but also for consumption, electrical or gas consumption, and for prices, electricity or gas prices. These are the key variables to forecast. So if you just have to remind of something about this code, most of the time you perform forecasts for this kind of parameters. Weather forecast, it's not our topic, but we use weather forecast to forecast this key variable because you know that renewable generation, they depend on the weather. So it's useful information. Right now, do you have any idea about the electricity prices? If you want to buy a megawatt hour of electricity on the day you have spot prices, market, do you think how much is it? Any idea or not? I think Bertrand asked you at the beginning of the microgrid course, how much would it be a megawatt hour of electricity? 200. Sorry? 200. 200 euro per megawatt hour in September? Sorry? 250. And right now? 400. 400? Yeah. So it was a little bit smaller in September, and now maybe it's around 200 and 300. But this is completely crazy. This is not the normal electricity prices. But so right now, it's really a nightmare to forecast electricity and gas prices. It's a completely a nightmare. Question? No. I just saw a hand. No, it's okay? No. There is no ghost. Okay, so, for decision making, sorry. And what is the definition of point forecasting? What is a point forecasting, basically? Do you remind what it is? No idea? No. Not at all? Okay, so I did not do my job last lecture, because it was about point forecast. So it's all in the name, point forecast. So what is a point forecast? Imagine you have never followed the lesson before, which seems to be the case. Just by reading point forecast, do you have any idea about what point forecast is?
Knowing what happened at specific time.
Okay, so it's forecasting in general. But point forecast. It's in the name. Is it a forecast with 100 scenario? Or is this just maybe a point? Point forecast, point forecast. Specific point for a specific time. It's a point forecast. Point forecasting is forecasting point forecast. It's really, if you want to remember that, just read point forecast, point. So point forecast. So of course it is to know in advance something, of course. But point forecast is to try to guess what will be variable, so electricity prices, with point. Okay, so for tomorrow at lunchtime, it will be 200 euros per megawatt. I guess this is my best guess. This is a point forecast. Okay, point forecast. Well, it's simple as that. Do not try to make complicated thing about it. It's just that. Okay. So we have a stochastic variable. Electricity prices are a stochastic variable, but renewable generation, it is a stochastic variable. We don't know about anything about it. And we just know that sometimes it's a random parameter and it depends on a lot of things. And so when we are considering point forecast, we are just saying, okay, we will model that stochastic variable that's really, really complicated. And we will model that as if it was a process that is discretized in time with some points. But of course, in reality, it is not that. But this is a way of modeling a stochastic variable. And it is as if we take the expectancy of the random variable. Mathematically, this is a deterministic process. And the deterministic process is a kind of average of a stochastic process. And so this is how we perform point forecasts. We are modeling the stochastic variable like that. And then we use a forecasting model that will compute points in advance for a specific variable. And so this is point forecast. Okay. So now that we have a forecasting model, we are able to perform and produce point forecast, so point in advance for a specific random variable. Do you have any idea about how to assess if these forecasts are good or not? I will help you. We have seen two strategies to do that. Yes.
Visual perception.
Sorry?
Visual perception.
Perception? Inspection. Visual inspection.
Visual inspection.
So this is one way to assess the quality. Just use our eyes. Okay, it seems nice or not. Okay, but this is more like okay, it's a way to assess the forecast. But when I am referring to the word strategy, it's a way. It's more like the global approach, the global methodology to assess forecast. Imagine we have a model, we have a data set, and so we perform forecast on the testing set. Remember learning, validation, testing set? And so there are two different strategies to do that. In one case, we have a big data set, and in that one case, we have a very short data set. So if you remember that, there are two different strategies to assess the forecast. Yes? These are more the two different types of forecasts, not strategy to evaluate the forecast. It's different. Yes?
If we have big data sets, we can split them in big parts. So one part, say, where we model we make the model and test it. Yeah, adapt all the parameters, and one it's well done.
Yes.
We can test it.
Yes.
So when we have big data, we can split it into big parts.
Yes.
If we have small data, we have to artificially create stable data, so to test it on small parts, but which differs each time.
Exactly. These are two most famous ways to assess a strategy to assess forecast. Of course, there are many others, but for you, just fine if you know this one. So congratulations. So yes, there are two ways. So this is what you just said. If we have a big data set, so of course you write your code to make your model, but you can split the data set into three parts, the training and validation and testing part. The training part is dedicated to learn the model. In the validation part, it is used to tune the hyperparameters of the model. So each time you will change an hyperparameter, you train again your model and so on, and you see, okay, change a little bit of the validation set, my score, it's a little bit better, okay. No, it's fine, I stop the hyperparameter selection. It's okay, my model is trained, I have selected my hyperparameters, and now, only at the end, I use the testing set, the final testing set to compute my forecast, and this is where I will compute my metrics. And this is where I can compare different forecasting models. Not there, here. So this strategy is most of the time used when you have enough data. And of course, it's easier when you have enough data. But sometimes in life, you don't have enough data. This is just like that. Sometimes when you work for a company, the company will tell you, okay, but it's difficult for me because I have to pay for the data. And so I can give you only 2 months or 3 months of data. And so it's not a lot of data to train a model. And so your testing set maybe will be composed only 1 day or 2. And you cannot assess your model only on 1 day because it will not be representative. If you have a forecasting model for PV generation, if you have only 1 day or 2, it will not be representative of your performance over an entire year because there is a seasonality of the PV, for instance. And so in that case, you use a different strategy, and this is what you say. You take your data, you split it into several parts, and you can do this strategy, but here, for the first time, you have this testing set. So here it is used to train the model. So imagine this is 1 day and here 2 months. Okay, so you can compute your metric on this testing set 1 day, but then you can do something else different. You split your data set differently, and you train on this part, and this is a new testing set, and so on and so on. And this is like if you expanded artificially your testing set, and here at the end, for instance, you have 5 days of testing set instead of only 1. And in the assignment, there's a question about this one, where you can do this. At the beginning, you start with that evaluation strategy, and there is a question where you can do it. So you will see how it works. Okay. And here's a question where you just answered before that. Do you know some quantitative metrics to assess the forecast? So you told me visual inspection, so this is true. We can use our eyes to assess forecasts, and this is more qualitative evaluation. But here, if we focus on a quantitative, so metric to evaluate forecast, do you have any idea about some metrics to assess forecast? In particular, point forecast, yes? Mean square error, yes. Right. So there is the famous mean square error, which is used in a lot of areas. And for instance, when you are performing linear regression, in fact, you are minimizing the mean square error. When you want to fit the parameter of your model, when you perform linear regression, you minimize the mean square error. So mean square error, yes, great. And maybe another one? No? Mean square error, so it's the square of the error, the average of the square of the error. Maybe there is another one where it is not the square.
The root.
That's the root mean square, okay, right. But it's approximately the same, but okay. T'es smart, t'es well joué, well done. But yes, yes.
The average?
Yes, the average, but the absolute average. You take the absolute average of the difference. And it may be smart because when you consider the mean square error, it means that if for some points you have a large difference between the observation and the prediction, it will penalize a lot large deviation, but it will not penalize small differences. So the mean square error is quite fine if you want to detect if you have outliers, so very large error. But sometimes you would like to know if on average your model is fine. Because imagine you have a model which on average is really fine, but sometimes you have 1 or 2 or 3 outliers. So the mean square error will be quite high. Okay, that's one thing. But if you want just to see on average, so like 95% of the time you are quite good, the mean square error is not designed for that, and you will use the mean absolute error because it will not penalize more of the outliers. And so like that, you can see if your model on average is fine. And so that's why it is really interesting to use both metrics, because you could have a model that is good for the mean absolute error and another one for the mean square error, but you don't really know which one is the best. So we just use both metrics. So like that, we see if on average the model is fine and if they produce outliers or not. So that's why most of the time we use a lot of different metrics and we combine them to assess if the model is good or not. And it is exactly the same for you. You have different vectors, mathematics, physics, biology, chemistry, I don't know. You do not have one grade for everything. You have several grades because we want to see if you are able to learn different things. Exactly the same for forecasting with different metrics, if you see the parallel. Okay. So mean absolute error. So the absolute error and the micro error or the root micro error. So here is the bias. So it is just the average of the error without the absolute. These are the most used in point forecast. Okay, so it was a short reminder about point forecast. Now let's see what is a probabilistic forecast. So do you know the various types of probability forecast? I know for sure that there is one person here that knows one of them. Because at the beginning, before we just begin the course, I heard something about it. So I'm sure someone knows one thing about it. Do you have any idea? Probabilistic forecast. Quantile, yes. Right. So quantile forecasting, yes, it is one of the various probabilistic forecasts. We can produce quantiles. Okay. So that's one. Do you have any idea about other type? I am sure you know some of them. Maybe you don't know that it is probabilistic forecast, but I know that you know that. Difficult. Yes? Try in French. Or... Interval de confiance, yes. So it is confidence interval. Okay, yes, great. Well done. So quantiles, confidence interval. Yes. And maybe a last one. I think you can find the last one. Sometimes in life, when you have different options for doing one thing, you say, okay, maybe if I have these conditions, I will do that. If I have this other condition, I will do that, and so on.
Decision tree.
Yes, decision tree. It's more like a machine learning model, decision tree, but the principle is that you can design several paths or scenarios. You have several scenarios. And so you could say, okay, for tomorrow, I don't really know on average what will be the production of my PV plant. I cannot say it will be 500 megawatts, but I can say that, okay, maybe I will, if I have sun, it will be 600. If it is between sunny and cloudy, 400. And if it is cloudy, it will be 200 megawatts. And so you have 3 scenarios. So this is another way of producing probabilistic forecasts. And decision tree, it's a machine learning tool that can produce point forecast and quantile forecast. It depends on the way you use it. And in the assignment, you will have a forecasting technique which is quite similar to decision tree, that is gradient boosting. So it's a little bit different, but just say for now that it's a little bit similar. And you will use it as a point forecasting tool, but also as a quantile forecasting. So we have prediction interval, it's almost like confidence interval, but let's say we have scenario, quantiles, and also density forecast. But as for point forecast, it is about knowing something or trying to get something into the future. So we are here at time t. So we are here right now. I can see outside, okay, outside it's a little bit sunny, but I can see here a cloud, okay? And based on that knowledge, I feed that to my forecasting model and we try to guess, okay, 2 hours, how much my production will be. Okay. And so we can say that in the future, okay, we would like to know more about prediction interval, or I am more interested in computing scenario or quantiles. It depends on my application. And here I am decision maker. I would like to say, okay, for me, this is very interesting to know the PV production, but as decision maker, I need several scenarios to take a good decision. So please provide me some scenario of prediction, because for me to take my decision, it's easier for me. And sometimes we have another decision maker, they tell you, no, scenario for me, it's not good. I would like to have an interval. And you can tell me, my PV production will be this, between this lower bound and this upper bound. And here, for instance, you have a 15% probability that it will be at the center. So this is a prediction interval. Okay. So you will select this one or the other one, based on what the decision maker wants. Because forecasts are used as input of decision maker. And when I say decision maker, it can be an algorithm. And for instance, when you consider an energy management system of a microgrid, there is an algorithm that will take the decision. And this algorithm, it can sometimes take decision based on scenario or on point forecast or on quantile and so on. Completely depends. Okay. So of course, the question, oh, what is a quantile or a percentile? It's a statistical thing. So I think you already know that. Can you explain it to me, for instance, what is a 50% quantile? What is the median? It's like the median, 50% quantile or the median is the same thing. What is the difference between the median and an average?
So the average value is, well, when we take everything and we sum it up and divide it by the number of individuals or something else. But the median is when 50% is above or 15% is below.
Exactly. Exactly. Did you get the difference between median and average? And sometimes it is equal. Sometimes the median is equals to the average. But most of the time it is not the case. For instance, consider the salary in Belgium. So how much we can earn. So I hope for you, Moye, we have a salary and a good one. I hope so. But if you consider the salary of a Belgian people in general, the average is different from the median. And do you think the average is higher or smaller than the median? Higher, yes. So, and what kind of information it gives you to know that? So what does it mean concretely? Practically, what does it mean that the average is higher than the median? Yes, so on the very high salary, we have a lot of very high salary, but no, it does not mean necessarily we have a lot, but we have very high, at least one very, very big. And so the average will be, is very sensitive to outliers. At the median, we just tell you I have 50% more than this value and 50% less than this value. See the difference? So this is where quantile and percentile are very useful for a decision maker because it gives you a lot of knowledge of your process. If you say, okay, my PV production tomorrow at lunchtime will be 500 megawatts, and this is the median, you say, okay, I have 50% chance that it will be more or 50% chance that it will be less. It's completely not the same thing that just saying to your decision maker, tomorrow I think it will be on average, you will have an average production of 500 megawatts. So you see, if you have to take a decision about that, it will not be the same. So this is why it is interesting to produce quantile or percentile. So, okay, let's see now the stochastic process. Imagine this is a wind power production. It should be something like that. And so if you want to produce quantiles, so here the little circle are the observation for the lead time. And there is a very small line here. These are the point forecast, and here we have a quantile forecast, and it is a median. And here we can see that for almost all lead times, the median is equal to the point forecast, which is the average. So it means that statistically, the distribution is well distributed. We do not have too many outliers. But here, you see there is a small difference. So here we have the point forecast that is the average that is higher than the median. And so if you're a decision maker, maybe here you will take the same decision, but here you will. Okay. And so when you want to produce a quantile, it's like if you want to estimate the probability. So you estimate the probability that your stochastic process will be higher or smaller than a value, a given value. It can be 10%, 20%, 30, 50, and so on. So you can compute a lot of different quantiles. But at the end, it's always the same thing. You need a model, a forecasting model. You need some information. So you need maybe to look at the weather forecast or other kind of information and to feed that information into your model. And you have to make your model able to produce quantity forecasts. And there are ways and techniques to transform a point forecasting model to quantile forecasting model. And for instance, decision tree, they can do that. Gradient boosting, they can do that. It is the same way, the same technique, the same process, exactly the same. But at the end, the output of the model will be different. And we just need to change something inside the model to do that, to produce point forecast or quantile forecast. And if you have followed the introduction to machine learning, but I am not sure, maybe one or two of you, yes, you have seen that into the forecasting model, we have what we name a loss function. We try to minimize the loss function to train our model, we minimize the loss function. And when we consider point forecast, most of the time, the loss function that we want to minimize is the mean square error. And when we consider quantile forecast, it's another kind of loss function. But at the end, the model is exactly the same. It's just that when we learn the model, we minimize a different metric. And when you want to do, for instance, linear regression, I think linear regression is quite a good example. You minimize a loss function that is a mean square error. And if one day you take the book of Quentin Louvaux, je pense que c'est second bachelor, one day, maybe dans 50 ans, pas sûr, and you will have a look about what was linear regression. Oh, I was young linear regression. Oh yes, the mean square error. It was minimizing the mean square error. And in fact, you were performing point forecast. Your model, which is a linear regression model, can perform point forecast because it minimizes the mean square error. And if you just change that loss function, you can do something different. So here are some examples of PV generation quantiles. Here it is a MLP, which is a multi-layer perceptron. It's kind of feed-forward neural network, so basic feed-forward neural networks. And here it is a LSTM that is a long short-term memory network. It is a recurrent neural network. It's a more evolved neural network. We don't care. Let's say this one is a little bit more naive than this one. In red, you have the observation of the PV generation. In black, you have the point forecast. And in blue, you have the 10% quantile and the 90% quantile. So this one is a 10%, and here it is a 90% quantile. And between them, I designed with a kind of threshold color over quantile. Here it is a 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. And so you can see that by using quantiles, you can build a kind of prediction interval. Because you can tell to your decision maker, okay, I expect that the PV generation will between the 10% and 90% quantile will be between these two curves. And so the decision makers know that, okay, my generation might be below that threshold because 10% of the time it will be smaller. But at least I should know that 80% of the time the production will be between these two thresholds, the lower bound and the upper. And it's completely different to know that just knowing that on average I will be there. Because when you are here or here, you do not know if you can be a lot more frequently higher or more frequently smaller. And you can see that this is the width between the upper and lower bound changes across week time. Okay, see? So here it means that we are less confident about our forecast. But it is very important for the decision makers to know that when you take that decision. So this is the main interest of quantitative forecast, is that you can build prediction interval. And this is very useful. So that's why then I choose the prediction interval, but the prediction interval is just an interval where you have two quantiles. So for instance, the 10% and the 90%. And so like that, you know that 80% of the time, my value of my true process will be within that interval. So this is a prediction interval. And of course, you can select which quantile you want, depending on what you want to do in daily life. Okay. Now there is another type of probability forecast that is the density. And the density, it's like if you are able to predict the probability density function of your stochastic process. For instance, if you consider a stochastic process that is a Gaussian process, you know for sure what is a Gaussian. And so if you know that law, of course, you know everything about your process. And this is almost the same thing, but for something that you do not know. For instance, PV generation, you do not know if it is a Gaussian process or not. But you would like to predict its density. And so you are trying to approximate its true density, because if you know it, then you can know anything about these processes. But at the end, when you know the density, it's almost like if you knew all the percentile or quantiles at the end, because you know for sure that for this density, there is a very high probability that the observation will be there, a very low probability that it will be here and here. So density function, it's like if you were trying to approximate the cumulative distribution function of your stochastic process. And there are techniques that are able to do that. But for the assignment, we will not consider that technique. It's a little bit more complex. But it's just for you to know that it exists and it is very useful. But most of the time, you need to use more advanced forecasting technique to do that. Okay, scenario, but I already asked you the question, so you already know that. And so the last one, type of stochastic scenario. So for a stochastic process, you could consider several options, several scenarios, sometimes this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and so on. And so your forecasting model could provide you several scenarios, several trajectories of your variable of interest. And so here it is for wind power. And this can be useful when you want to take decision, because by using several scenarios, you can have an idea or a guess, or if it will be probable or not that your average value will be here or here or here. Or sometimes you are interested in considering the worst case scenario, because sometimes you want to take a decision that is robust, because you prefer to be conservative than being optimistic, for instance. And so imagine you are in a situation where if you have not enough energy, for instance, if you are an hospital, imagine if you have not enough energy, it may bring a very big problem. For instance, for an hospital, it will be a health problem, and you cannot perform surgery and so on. So you ask a forecaster to tell you what is the worst case scenario in terms of PV generation, for instance. Because for me, I prefer to rely on the worst PV trajectory to be sure to plan my thing and so on. We tell you, okay, this is this one. Okay, so I plan to do everything about this scenario. Okay, so you are very conservative. And it is the same thing in power systems when, for instance, the TSO wants to balance the grid. It wants to be very reliable, because if we have a blackout, it's really a nightmare from an economical point of view, because a lot of companies, they cannot work, and sometimes it can be a very, let's say, for instance, you have a power plant. If you have no power anymore and your industrial or chemical process just stops, sometimes you cannot just start again in 1 hour. Sometimes you have to wait for days before being able to process again your things. So you can lose billions of euros just like that. So the TSO wants to be very reliable when it balances the grids. And so most of the time, it is able to perform a worst case trajectory and so on to be sure that all the line grids and so on are very reliable. Okay. Here it is an example by using a deep learning generative model that is computed in gray several scenarios of PV generation. So you see there are several trajectories. In red, it is the observation. In black, it is a 50% quantile. In blue, the 10% quantile, and in green, the 90%. And you can see that sometimes you have some scenarios that are smaller than the 10% quantile, and it can happen in reality. So it may be useful to know about this scenario or this one, for instance. But you will not see a scenario for the assignment. But there are some models that can do that. And if you follow next year's deep learning course of GLOOP, you will see some techniques that can do that. You have any question about this page? Is it okay? Do not hesitate to interrupt me if you have any question.
I didn't understand how to make a scenario.
How we can produce scenario? Yeah. Oh,
Just how do you make a scenario?
How is it possible that a forecasting technique can produce several scenarios for a given day? Let's say that, for instance, when you consider, for instance, the stochastic variable, imagine it follows a Gaussian law, so a normal distribution. So imagine that PV generation is like a Gaussian distribution. And so, okay, you guess that it is a Gaussian distribution, so your forecasting model will be a Gaussian distribution. And it's like if, okay, you say, I want this first scenario, it's like a sample of the Gaussian distribution, and this time it is here, and the second time it is there, and there, and there. And sometimes you will produce scenarios that are more at the tails of the Gaussian distribution. And this is like that you will produce scenarios. It is by approximating the stochastic distribution of your process. So the Gaussian distribution, it's a very easy and simple one, and in reality, they are much more complex. But it's just to give you an insight, these models, they are able to learn what is the stochastic distribution of the process. And so once you have learned it, you are able to sample trajectory from this distribution. For a given day, you just sample, it's like a sampling. Is it better like that or not?
No, it's not cool.
Tu peux me dire en français si c'est peut-être plus facile.
Tout le monde peut passer peut-être un peu.
Ça, c'est comme un tirage, quoi. Tu fais un tirage aléatoire à partir d'une loi gaussienne.
Ça, c'est pour le premier point.
Pour les points d'après. Ah, tu veux dire pour avoir plusieurs points comme ça. Ah oui, oui. C'est ce qu'on appelle des gaussiennes à plusieurs dimensions.
Oui,
tu as une gaussienne pour le premier patron, le deuxième, le troisième. Tu peux avoir une simple gaussienne, l'exponentielle de machin, x carré, c'est une dimension. Et tu peux imaginer ça avec des vecteurs dedans et tu as une gaussienne à 10 dimensions, 20 dimensions, 50 dimensions, 100 dimensions. Il faut imaginer que c'est les processus stochastiques et derrière, qui sont dehors, c'est vraiment des trucs à plusieurs dimensions. But you see that it's a little bit more complex.
Oui.
Okay, so imagine we are able to produce probability forecasts. Now we would like to assess them. Like point forecasting, we would like to know if they are good or bad. The first thing to do, visual inspection. The first thing to do. And here we can compare two models. And here also we have the quantiles, different quantiles of this model. And you can see that, for instance, we experience 10% and 90% quantile between these two models, they are different. You can see that here it's a little bit more sharper than here. In your opinion, which one is the best model? By just looking at it. Can we answer it? Can we answer to that question? In red, it is the observation. So here it is a true realization of the PV generation. And here it is a 10% quantile and 90%. So in your opinion, which is the best model? Which one is the best model?
The right.
The right. So this one? Yes, this is true. And can you explain it?
The real observation is more often in the interval.
Yes. So we can see here that more frequently the observation lies between the upper and lower bands. And it is okay that sometimes it is outside because it is a 10% quantile. So 10% of the time, the observation will be outside. So it's okay if it's sometimes it's outside. But if it is too many times outside, it's a little bit strange. So here like that, we would say, okay, this one seems better than this one, visually. Then we need to compute quantitative metrics to be sure, but just visually, it seems a little bit better. Okay. I'm not sure that we can get the answer to this one, but let's try. Do you have any idea about the difference between forecast value and forecast quality? I can help you a little bit because it is not so easy. Quality, for instance, the quality of something, it's like if you could use some metrics to say, okay, the quality of that process by using this metric, it is okay, because I have the mean square error, I have the mean average error, and so on. So I can define several metrics for my forecast, and I can say in terms of quality regarding this metric, it is good, bad, good, bad. And value, it is not related to money. So I can help you for this one. Forecast quality, this is when you use metrics to assess a forecast. We use several metrics to assess the quality. And if value is more related to money, how can we assess a forecast based on money? At the end, why do we do forecasting? Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. We make decision at the end because we would like to make some benefits. So it means that for the forecasting value, if you want to assess that, we need to take a decision. And so it means that we need to consider a case study where we will take some decision. And so sometimes when you have a forecasting model, you assess the quality, of course, you use some metrics and you assess the quality. Okay. But you would like to go further and say, okay, but what is the value of my forecast? So I will consider a case study where I will take decision based on the forecast and I will evaluate in terms of euro if it's good or bad. And so this is exactly the difference between quality and value. And this is something that is really important to understand, to differentiate the quality and the value. The value is related to decision-making process. And so if you consider a different decision-making process, the forecast value will likely not be the same for a given forecasting model. But this is fine because you would like to find the best forecasting model for a given application. And sometimes imagine you have two forecasting models. Maybe there will be one which is better in terms of quality, but it does not mean that this one will be better for forecasting value. So that's why it is interesting and very important to consider both the quality and the value, because at the end you take a decision. But most of the time, if you have a good quality, it will help to get a good value. But it is not always the case. So when we consider quality, we would like our forecast to be reliable, sharp, and skilled. So reliable means like, okay, if we define some quantiles, the 10%, 90% quantile, we would like that it is okay with these quantiles. So we like that these quantiles are well calibrated. We like that this forecast is informative, and that most of the time my mean square error is small, for instance, so that they are skilled. And so the calibration, it's about taking the probabilistic contract. If I define a quantile, the 50% quantile, so the median, I would like that in reality, 50% of the observation are higher or smaller, because if it is not the case, it means that my quantile is not reliable. I am just saying, okay, this is a 50% quantile, but in fact, this is not 50% of the time higher or smaller. So there is a problem with my forecast. And for the prediction interval, it's the same thing. If I define the prediction interval, so I say that 80% of the time, the value will be within this interval. And if in reality it is not the case, it means that my forecasting model is bad. So I want my forecasting model to be reliable. So it means that I need to calibrate my forecasting model. And to assess that, there are what we call reliability diagrams. And so here you have the different quantiles from 0 to 100%, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 7%. Then you can compute statistically the observed value and what you would like in reality. So if your forecasting model for the median is not 50% higher or smaller, imagine it is 40% of the time higher and 60% of the time smaller, the point will be there. And so it will deviate from this line. And so this is a way to assess the reliability of a quantitative forecast. It's about respecting the probabilistic contract. And so you evaluate your quantitative forecast one by one. If you design a 10% quantile, you will compare the observation to your prediction, and you see if, okay, 10% of the time it is smaller and 80% of the time higher, it's okay. But if it is not the case, maybe it will be 20 and 80, okay. Not so good. And you do that again for the 20% quantile and so on and so on and so on, and you can design this reliability diagram. So the closer to the diagonal, the better. And so it's a very easy way. Just visually, by looking at that, you know if your quantitative forecasting model is well calibrated or not. About the sharpness, it's about the width of the prediction interval. And so most of the time, we would like to be the sharpness, which is the smallest one possible, because if the prediction interval between the 10%, 90% quantile is very small, very sharp, it means that we have a small uncertainty. And so it's easier to take a decision. And if your model is not good, maybe sometimes it will tell you, okay, it is between this upper bound or lower bound. Okay, but it does not tell you anything because I don't know where it is. So you would like your model to be able to design sharp quantity forecasts. So for instance, here you have different quantiles. So here 10%, 20%, so and 90%. And here it is a lead time. And so the sharpness will be the difference between the quantiles, so the prediction interval. And most of the time, it is okay if with the time, it is less sharp because it is much more difficult to forecast accurately something in 2 days than in 1 day. So it's okay. But if you have something like that, it means that probably your forecasting model has a problem somewhere, probably. And you would like to reduce as much as possible the distance between the different quantiles, if it's possible, of course. But this is what you would like to do. Do you know some probabilistic forecast metric? For point forecast, we have the mean square error, we have the mean absolute error. And do you know something maybe similar for probabilistic forecast? Maybe not, it's possible. No? There is one that is quite famous, that is a continuous ranked probability score, CRPS, and you will use this one in the assignment. And this is almost the mean absolute error, but for probability forecast. We can say that it is the extension of the mean absolute error to probability forecast. And there is a mathematical definition, okay? But the idea is to try to measure some distance between quantiles or some scenario, in a way, if you want. And you can directly compare a point forecasting model to a quantity forecasting model by using this metric because it is really the extension of this one. And you will use this one in your assignments. And so here, for instance, I have 3 different forecasting models, one in blue, another one in red, another one in green, gradient boosting regressor, and 2 neural networks. And I computed the continuous rank probability score, and it is normalized by the installed capacity. And we can see which model is the best for different time periods. And here we can see that most of the time, the red one seems to be better than the other one because the CRPS is smaller. But you could do the same for point forecast with the mean absolute error, for instance. You will have approximately the same thing. I can give you more example here. Here it is for the PV production, and you have 3 models. These are 3 different models that produce scenario. Here I computed the CRPS for different hours of the day. And so we can see here that the blue one, for instance, is a little bit better than the other one. These 9 are the same model, but for wind power generation. And we can see that here for wind power, it seems to be that the orange one that has the best CRPS. And here, this dashed line is for electrical consumption. So again, the 3 same model. And here it is the blue one that seems to be the best in terms of CRPS. And so by using this metric, you can compare a forecasting model for several data sets. Here we have a wind power data set, a PV power data set, and a electrical consumption data set. So it can be useful also to assess forecasting technique on several data sets. To speak, because sometimes you can have a technique that is good for PV forecasting, but it will not be the same for wind power forecasting. And here we can see that the blue model seems to be quite fine for the load, so electrical consumption and the PV. But for the wind power, it is the orange one. And here it is the reliability diagram that I just talked about a little bit earlier. And we like to be close to the diagonal. And we see that sometimes, for instance, the orange model is not so good. So maybe it is not so bad here for the CRPS, but here it seems that in terms of reliability, not so good. So it's always something to do to use different metrics. Because if we just rely on this metric, maybe we say, okay, the orange one seems to be not the best, but the second one or almost the best one, and here, finally, it's not the same thing. Then you can introduce more quantitative metrics. So here it is the energy score, and it is another kind of metrics that can assess scenario. Because when you use a continuous rank probability score, you cannot use it to assess scenario. It can only be used to assess quantiles. And so the energy score will provide you another insight about the forecast. And I could tell you about many other metrics, but it is not useful. Just to know that there are various probabilistic metrics, and it is similar to point forecast, where we can consider various probabilistic point forecast metrics. Any question about this stage? Focus on a specific case study. And so we have different type of forecasts, so scenario, quantile, forecast, and so on. And they all can be used as decision-making, for example, for day-to-day planner on micro and so on. And I will focus on just to give you some insight about what it could be about scenarios from a deep learning generative model. And so it is a recent deep learning technique, normalizing flow, that we introduce into power system because it is not very used in power system because it's a quite kind of recent technique, but it has been used in computer vision, for instance. And so we compare this deep recent learning technique with two other deep learning generative models, generative adversarial networks and variational outbound encoders. And both of them have been a lot more used in power systems. So they can be a very good baseline to compare this technique. And so we implement all the three models in their conditional form by using the weather forecast. So it means that we use as input some weather forecast to produce scenario. And as you will see, on average, normalizing flow tends to be more accurate in terms of quality and value. So it means that we use metrics to assess the quality and also efficiency. And the motivation of the study was that, in fact, there was only one study that compared this technique with weather, but only for the consumption, and it did not use the weather forecast, and they were only assessing the quality. So it means, okay, they are good for that metric, but, and then, in terms of value, we didn't know anything about that. So the methodology to do that is, in fact, to select a data set. So we have a data set, a case study, and this data set that is open source, which is quite useful because it means that you can reproduce the results. And so in this data set, there was a PV power plant, a wind power plant, and electrical consumption. So it means that we could compare the model of different kinds of data. And so we have the three models. So they will produce scenario for every data set. And then we use 8 complementary metrics to assess the quality. And we use a case study to assess the forecast value. And the case study is a day-ahead of an energy retailer and the energy market. At the end, we will see that normalizing flow tends to be a little bit more accurate than the two other generative models. I'll skip this one and this one because we don't care. And about the normalizing flow, it is also a deep learning generative model. But what you need to understand is that you have your variable of interest. So, for instance, the PV generation. And at the end, you have a Gaussian normal distribution. And it will build a kind of projection between the two stochastic variables. Here it could be something else, but it is easier to take something that is quite simple. And so it builds a projection between the two variables, the two stochastic process. So at the end, when you learn your model, you have the projection, and you can just take the inverse, and from the Gaussian law, you can just sample then the scenario. So this is the principle of these techniques, and it is quite powerful in fact. Of course, the tricky part is to learn. It's how can you learn to make this projection between something here like PV generation, but it could be electricity prices or wind power or electrical consumption, whatever it is. How you can learn something that will be the projection between something that you don't know and something that you know. And in fact, behind that, you have several neural networks that can do that. But once you have learned, it's easy because you just take the inverse. Here you know what it is, and you just sample, and at the end, it will produce you a scenario of the variable of interest. about variational autoencoders and generative adversarial equality, because I don't want you to go into the detail. But if you want to know more, you can see the slide and you can ask me a question if you want, but I think it's too advanced right now. And so remember about the difference about forecast quality and value. We would like to assess this model in terms of quality and value. So the quality metrics and the value by considering a case. Concerning the metrics, we use several metrics. So for instance, the continuous rank probability score, but also the quantity score, variability diagrams, energy score, variance score. So you can see there is a lot of metrics. We design also a classifier-based metrics. We can compute correlation between scenarios. We can use statistical tests and so on and so on. But it's just to tell you that it's better when you use several metrics to be sure that your model is not good for only one or two metrics. And all of these metrics are quite different. So they will not evaluate the same way the model. So it's like the mean absolute error, the mean square error. They do not evaluate the same way the model. So it's better when you can use complementary metrics to be sure that you evaluate well your model. For the case study, so we consider the case study of an energy retailer. So you're an energy retailer and you would like to supply energy for your customer. And this energy retailer has, for instance, a PV power generation plant, a PV generation plant. They also have a consumer, so electrical consumption, and it can use a battery energy storage system to shift, for instance, a renewable production and to supply its customer for different hours of the day. And the goal is to balance all of this, so the portfolio on an hourly basis. Because if you do not balance well the production and consumption, we'll have to pay fines, so some penalty to the TSO. So the goal is to minimize the penalty. So it's to supply at the right time, the right amount of energy that your customers need, based on what you have in terms of production, PV, and wind power. But sometimes you have no wind and no PV. So it means that you need to store energy to supply your clients when you need. And so to do that, you need to take decision. You need to take decision to say, okay, at this time I need to charge the battery, and at this time I need to discharge the battery, for instance, or to import from the grid or to export to the grid. And to take this decision, we use a stochastic planner. And so stochastic planner, it does what? It takes decision based on scenarios. So we will have several scenarios of wind power, PV generation, and electrical consumption. These scenarios are computed by the deep learning generative model, and then the stochastic planner can take decision based on scenario. So it's a way of taking decision. And based on this scenario, it says, okay, at this time, you import, you export, you charge, you discharge, and so on. And we hope the decisions are good to minimize the penalty. It's a schematic of what I just said. So we have our open data set, PV, wind power, electrical consumption. And here the data set is big enough. We have like 1 or 2 years of data. So we can divide it into 3 parts: a learning part, a validation set, and testing set. The learning set is used to train all the model, and the validation set to tune the hyperparameter. Once we have done this process, it's finished. We use the train model to produce scenarios as a testing set. And then these scenarios are used to assess the quality with the 8 metrics, and also the value by considering the case study of the energy retailer. And so at the end, we can compare the 3 models in terms of quality and in terms of value. I skip this one. In terms of quality, if we do a visual inspection, the first thing to do, here we consider, for instance, the wind power scenario. Here we have the normalized inflow model and the two other model. We can see directly that the scenarios are not the same between this model and the two other. Here you can see in gray the scenario, it seems to be, they seem to vary a lot. They do not seem to have a kind of a pattern between them. And here you can see that here the scenario, even if they are not equal to each other, they seem to have the same kind of pattern. Sometimes you can just say, okay, if I vertically translate it, it will approximately be the same. So here there seems to be a correlation between the scenario, and here no. And to assess that, we can compute correlation matrix. So you can compute correlation between scenarios, and here you have the matrix of correlation. And so when you have one, it means that they are strongly correlated for each time period. And if it is 0 or close to 0, it means that it is not correlated. And so here you can see there is no correlation between the scenarios, obviously. And here you can see that you have some correlation for some hours for the scenarios. So just by visual inspection, you can tell that there is a very, very strong difference between this model and the two other one. But at this stage, you cannot tell which one is the best. You can just say visually, there is a difference. But at the end, I don't know what it will mean. It is the same for the PV. Here, the PV is much more erratic than here, and you can see that also on the correlation matrix. And also for the electrical consumption. Here you can see the electrical consumption, the scenario, they are almost the same in terms of shape. They have, it's like just they have been translated vertically. And here the correlation matrix is like one everywhere, so it means that they are perfectly correlated. And here it is not the case. And so if we compute all the average score for all the metrics, so here we have the wind power, the PV, and the electrical consumption, you can compute the score for each metric, for each model. And here at the end, you have a bunch of scores, and you can see which one is the best. And again, for the normalizing flow, which is here in bold, the scores are better because they are smaller than the two of the model. And for the wind power, it is this one, which is a little bit better. But so at the end, you can say, okay, based on all of these metrics, it seems to be that this model seems to be the best for the PV and the electrical consumption, but for the wind power, it is this one. You do not need to remind all the details, just to give you an example of how to assess model, because in the assignment, this is what we will do. Okay, but if this was about the quality, okay, so in terms of quality, normalizing flow tends to be overall quite good, because for PV and for electrical consumption, they are the best. But what is it in terms of value? So we need now to consider the value evaluation. So the day-ahead bidding of an energy retailer. So we can use the wind power scenario, the PV generation scenario, and the electrical consumption scenario to take decision as an energy retailer. And so we have a stochastic planner that will compute the day-ahead bits for each generative model. We have different day-ahead bits, and then at the end, we'll compare the decision between all the three models, and we will see which one provides the best results in terms of money. So we can compute the net profit. The net profit is the profit minus the penalty. And we can compute that profit for all the day of the simulation. And here, the normalizing flow in terms of kilo euro, they achieve the best profit comparing with the two other models. So it means that the scenario provided by these techniques, normalizing flow, seems to help the stochastic planner to take the best decision in comparison with the two other models. So here for this case study in terms of value, it is the normalizing flow that provides the best result. But of course, you can assess your model in terms of quality and in terms of value, but you could also consider other criteria for your forecasting model. For instance, the training speed. It may be an issue if your model takes one month to be trained and you need a new model every day, it will be a big problem. So depending on your application, it may be something important or not. The same thing for the sample speed. So here we have the quality evaluation value, but it can be also for the hyperparameter search. When you need to find the relevant hyperparameters in your model, you will see that during the assignment. Sometimes you will find very easily some hyperparameters, you will tune some value, it seems to be fine, okay. But sometimes it can take days to do that because you will have to test thousands and thousands of values. And if your technique is very sensitive to the choice of hyperparameters that you do, it may be a problem. Another criteria that may be interesting to consider is the implementation. Is it easily implementable or not? Imagine you have to implement your model from scratch. If it's difficult to implement, you will never implement it. But if it's easy to implement, you may use your model. So it may be also a criteria for you as a decision maker or not. And so here at the end, we compare all the three models for all these criteria. And for the normalizing flow, okay, they perform well in terms of quality of value, it's good. But for the training speed and sample speed, they are a little bit slow in comparison with the two other models. And in terms of implementation, it is the same thing. If you do not have a library for this model, a Python library that you can use directly, it would be difficult for someone who does not know anything about Python. So depending on your application, maybe quality and value will not be your only criteria to consider. So also keep that in mind that as decision maker, you have a lot of criteria to consider to select a model. So for this study, a fair and fair comparison in terms of quality of value has been conducted for the three models on an open data set with several tracks, so wind power, PV power, and load scenario. And in terms of quality and value, normalizing flow tends to be quite nice. And so they could be used in other applications in power systems. Okay, so it was just to give you an example on how to compare model on a case study. In the assignment, you will do the same, but of course, it will be much more easier to do. You will have less criteria, and the model will be much more easier to use. So to conclude this lecture, the take-home message is, of course, we do forecasting for decision-making. We do not do forecasting just for forecasting, and in everyday life, we do forecasting for decision-making. So this is the same thing for power systems. We forecast some key variables, so the renewable generation, for example, that is uncertain, so it is very useful to be able to accurately forecast the renewable generation, but also the electrical consumption or the electricity and gas prices. These are key variables to forecast in power system because the decision makers need to know some guess about their potential value to take reliable decision. And so the TSO ALA need forecast. Our energy supplier, ENGIE, Luminus, Lamperis, and so on, they need forecast to take decision. So a lot of actors in the energy markets need also a forecast. You need to know the electricity prices, the gas prices, and so on and so on. There are various types of forecasts. In terms of probability forecast, we have the quantile, density forecast, prediction interval, and scenario. But depending on your application, you may want one or the other one. So it completely depends on the application that you consider. And so at the end, if you want, for instance, the scenario, you will have different trajectories, and based on this trajectory, you may take a decision. Maybe sometimes you may want to prefer a prediction interval, so to know, okay, I guess my prediction will be this lower and this upper. Sometimes you just consider point forecast because for you it is fine just to do the point forecast. In some application it is fine. You do not need more advanced technique. This application may be fine. Or in very more advanced case, you need to know the density of the technique. Remember that we differentiate forecast quality and value. It's very important to understand the difference. And you would like to assess first your quality of the forecast by using some metrics, and then to assess the value by considering a case study. And if you have very good quality of forecast, it does not mean that you will have a very good value. Probably that it will help. Because most of the time, if you have a good quality, it means that your forecasting process captures well the reality. But it is not always the case. So be very careful about that. And most of the time, you need to consider both. There are several ways to assess a forecast, and we like to forecast to be real world, but also sharp and also skilled. And there are different kind of metrics that can assess these three trends. And so we can consider a lot of metrics. So for instance, the continuous probability score, but we have also the quantity score, the merit diagram. We can use the energy score, variogram score, and so on. And so each one of these metrics will assess a different behavior of the forecast. But it is useful to consider complementary metrics. So for point forecast, for instance, it is the mean square error or the mean absolute error. But it is useful to consider both. And in the assignment, you will consider both, for instance. These are some resources to be the topic, but I already told you about that. And so for me, it is